arch through the middle. Others carried lists of cities, storms, debts, names, animals, graves, games, accidents, songs, and dates, as if numbering the world could replace saying one true thing. I stepped away from the ashtray and the room met me in pieces. The sofa sagged under newspapers. I woke before I knew I had opened my eyes. Wings struck the ceiling above me, hard enough to dust from the plaster, and a seagull cut across my room in a tight, furious circle. I sat up under the blanket. The bird passed over the chair, scraped the air near the wall, banked too late, and beat its wings again before it hit anything solid. The window was shut. The latch was down. The door was locked. I looked from one to the other and found no gap large enough for a hand, let alone a screw. Smoke filled my mouth, dry and bitter, and I stayed under the blanket as if a thin layer of fabric could mark where sleep ended. The seagull dropped toward the floor, rose fast, and struck the lampshade. The room jumped with the impact. I held the cigarette away from the sheet and watched ash bend in the disturbed air. Nothing in the room explained the bird. Nothing outside could enter. Yet it kept flying, wall to wall, driving its cries through the locked morning until the room no longer matched the window, the latch, or the door my hands had checked.
I forced the words onto the page. They were short and jagged.
and read the only words on it. For one letter. 3 words. And still they made the room heavier.
I went through a phase where I thought if I just wrote enough, the answers would come.
I got up and crossed the floor by choosing narrow gaps between ashtrays, books, envelopes, unpaid bills, dead lighters, pens without caps, and cigarette packs crushed flat. The mess was not random. It was an archive of stops. One page held a first sentence with no second. Another held 2 lines and a I had not sent. One woman waited at the center of it. Massive, brutalist doorway groaned. A low, metallic shriek that vibrated through the floorboards and into the soles of his feet. Elias gripped the edge of the frame, his knuckles whitening as the heavy steel plates ground against the tracks, finally dragging themselves into the wall. A sliver of cold, pulsing azure light bled into the room, cutting through the stagnant air. It was a sterile, unforgiving glow. He did not hesitate. He stepped over the threshold and into the corridor, the heavy slab of steel slamming shut behind him with a final, echoing thud.
He held his breath.
The
slightest sound meant discovery.
Silence. He stood there for a moment, letting his eyes adjust to the flicker of the light. He did not look back at the room he had just vacated. To look back was to invite doubt, and he had no room for that now. He checked the seal of his gloves, smoothed the surface of his skin, and exhaled a breath that fogged briefly in the sudden drop in temperature. The path ahead was illuminated by the rhythmic pulse of the walls. He took one step, then another, moving forward into the blue void, leaving the world he once knew completely and irrevocably behind. The corridor stretched forward, an endless artery of steel and shadow. Elias pushed his pace, his boots striking the metal grating with a cadence that echoed against the high, hidden ceiling. Click. A pause. Click. The sound was sharp, brittle, and entirely alone. He did not vary his stride even when the floor beneath him shifted from solid plating to a rusted, uneven grate. The metal flexed under his weight, threatening to snag his heel, but he compensated with a slight adjustment of his weight, his movement remaining fluid and precise. Condensation dripped from the overhead pipes, hitting the floor with soft, rhythmic splashes that punctuated the metallic ringing of his footsteps. He kept his head tilted forward, eyes fixed on the point where the blue light bled into the deepest shadows. He was a machine in motion. And the infinite horizon was merely the space he had to cross to reach it. He kept his hands at his sides, fingers curled, rhythmically counting the seconds of his own isolation. The rhythm of his boots shifted as the floor transitioned into a smooth, seamless alloy. Ahead, the corridor was blocked by a towering blast door, a solid slab of reinforced steel that showed no seam or handle. Elias did not slow down. He maintained his steady, measured pace, his gaze fixed on the center of the dark metal. When he was 10 paces away, the door groaned, a low-frequency hum that vibrated through the air. Without a manual override or a visible key, the heavy steel segments began to retract into the ceiling, sliding upward with impossible speed. He walked through the opening just as the last plate cleared his head, the gap closing instantly behind him once he passed. Climbed my back by number, not by weight. Rent, smoke, borrowed money, returned lies, calls unanswered, promises left standing in doorways. I wrote faster because stopping gave each thing more room. Forgive me if the dishes rose. Forgive me if trains left without me. Forgive me if a shot cracked the night. He did not glance back. He did not acknowledge the engineering feat that had just occurred. His expression remained entirely neutral, his breathing shallow and steady. It was as if the structure were an extension of his own will, anticipating his arrival before he had even declared his intent.
The sentence stretched on, an unbroken line of thought spilling onto the page, capturing the silence of the room.
He navigated the transition with the casual confidence of someone walking through their own home. The corridor beyond opened up, equally cold, equally silent, and equally compliant to his presence. He moved forward, his stride never faltering, the path clearing before him like a wave parting for a ship. The corridor ended abruptly at a raised platform. In its center sat a slab of dark, polished obsidian, its surface humming with a low-frequency vibration that rattled the floor beneath his feet. Elias stepped onto the platform and stopped. He reached out, his hand hovering inches above the stone, where shifting patterns of light danced in the air like trapped lightning. He pressed his palm against the surface. The console flared, a cascade of data streams erupting from the contact point and crawling up his forearm.